This is our winter webinar series. Our Extension Fruit and Vegetable team is doing webinars every Wednesday at noon for the next, I think, 10, 15 weeks or so about a bunch of different topics related to fruit and vegetable production. So here's that list of all the things coming up. So we're still at the very beginning. We're kind of at the beginning of thinking about the growing season. So we're doing those big picture topics. And this week we are talking about crop planning to meet your production goals. And as we go through the season, we're going to get more specific about kind of in-season topics and post-harvest topics to kind of follow the flow of the growing season. And we just have this little plug here for our newsletter. So if you don't already follow our newsletter, this is the main way that our team communicates with farmers. So in the growing season, every single week, we put out a weekly vegetable update and a weekly fruit update. We are a little team, but we're very busy. We spend our summers kind of visiting farmers across the whole state. And so we see a lot and we get a lot of questions. And so we try to keep people updated about what we're seeing, things you should be thinking about every week. And then we also post opportunities like this upcoming climate cohort and other events in that newsletter. So today we are focused on crop planning to meet your production goals. And I guess just a little introduction from me. I'm Natalie Hoydel. I am a vegetable crops educator. So I am kind of the generalist on our team. I cover everything from soil health and nutrient management to climate resilience to crop planning to irrigation. And so I am here to support you with your planning throughout the growing season. And then more broadly with bigger projects where we're kind of figuring out together how we grow vegetables more sustainably, more profitably in Minnesota. So a little bit of background on why we're talking about crop planning beyond just like it's something you're thinking about right now. We have seen over the last like 5 or 6 years a kind of a twofold problem where on the one hand, we hear from farmers every year at the end of the summer who are like, I have fields of tomatoes and I don't know where to send them. Like, help me find a market for these crops. And it's really hard at that point in the season to find a market for things. And so we are really kind of focused on helping people think more from the perspective of growing for the markets that you have versus just like putting stuff in the ground and hoping you find a place to sell it. On the other hand, we have also seen like really a shift in interest to selling to wholesale markets. Again, in that last like 5 to 6 year period where there's been a lot of investment through food hubs like the Good Acre in buying local produce and in schools. And what we're seeing is that farmers who have contracts to sell wholesale are kind of consistently not meeting those contracts. So on the one hand, we have people who are growing too much, don't know where to sell it. And then on the other hand, we have folks who are trying to grow a set amount of produce for a contract that they have and not able to fulfill that contract, either because they didn't plant enough, or because there are issues in the growing season and they have crop failure. And so this is really trying to get people kind of in the mindset and with the right tools to know how much to grow, when to plant it, in order to really successfully kind of follow through with your production goals. And that could be a wholesale contract, but it could just be the farmer's market too. Like, how many bunches of radishes do you want to have at the farmer's market every week? So that's going to be the focus of today's kind of figuring out the right crops for you based on your market, and then planning backwards from that goal to this point in the season where you are ordering seeds, you're figuring out how much to plant, you're making your field plans, and deciding how much area in your operation to dedicate to growing each thing. And I'm just going to quick scroll through and see who's here. Thanks for sharing. And I'll keep an eye on the chat as we go. And so if you have any like clarifying questions, something I'm not explaining very well, just throw it in the chat and I'll see it. And if there are like bigger picture questions, I might wait until the end to answer. All right, so if you're here last week, I think Annalisa had a few of these pictures, but I am gonna repeat a few of them just to kind of share um, what how it looks pretty different depending on your market um, when you then do your crop planning at the beginning of the season. And so if you are primarily a fresh market grower, you're growing for farmers markets, or maybe you have a CSA that's community supported agriculture, your customers really want and expect like a nice variety of things every week. This these photos are from farm called Susie's Farm, totally random farm on the East Coast, but she had really nice photos. Um, Early in the season, that might look like a really nice variety of greens, maybe some value added things like if you've got dry beans from last year, some herbs. Later in the season, that's a lot of different fruit, greens, maybe some things like eggs. You're really going for that diversity of product and volume of product. Um, and also kind of looking for fun stuff that's going to bring people to your stall at the farmer's market, going to keep people engaged in your CSA. Whereas when you start to shift to more of a wholesale market, and I'm not talking about like selling to Whole Foods or Cub Foods, we're thinking smaller scale wholesale. So maybe you're selling to a local restaurant, maybe you're selling like a small order to a school. That really starts to shift where it's less about having a lot of stuff and it's more about just having a really consistently good product. So instead of, all those colorful greens, you might have many boxes of peppers. We also see in these kind of smaller wholesale accounts, like if you're selling to a restaurant, that sometimes you end up with really weird requests. Like maybe you are growing radicchio every week for a restaurant. Not something you would grow for the farmer's market, but this restaurant really wants to stand out. They want a unique product from you. We also hear from farmers who are trying to sell wholesale to maybe a local school or a local co-op that co-op like already has really consistent products from other farmers. And if you're just trying to get your foot in the door, sometimes you end up growing something kind of funny. Ariel was here last week talking about um, choosing a market. And one of his stories is that to get into the wedge co-op, he started growing them fava beans because that was something they didn't have. And then once he was one of their vendors, they started to buy other things from him. So that's kind of a funny nuance of small scale wholesale sometimes. When you get to much larger wholesale, we are looking at um, a lot of production all at once. So you might have like an entire acre of watermelons that you're going to harvest like within the same week. Um, Uniformity becomes a lot more important. So at the farmer's market, you might be able to sell zucchinis that are like 4 inches long and 6 inches long and 8 inches long. You might even find someone who wants a 14-inch zucchini to make zucchini bread. But once you start to get into wholesale, especially at a larger scale, the standards become much more strict. So they may only purchase that like perfect 7-inch long zucchini. It means that you're not going to be able to sell everything. You're going to have a little bit more waste. You have to be a lot more careful about sorting and grading your produce. And so as we're planning for these different markets, that means really different things when it comes to like when you're planting the varieties that you're choosing. And so we're going to get into what that looks like. The final market that I think is worth mentioning is, I would say just in the last like 2 to 3 years, there's been a really significant shift in food shelves buying directly from local farmers. And there's kind of, I think sometimes this assumption that like, oh, it's being donated, so it doesn't need to have the same quality standards, which I think is not right for a lot of reasons. It is true that a food shelf may have slightly lower visual standards. They might be willing to take a kale like this that has a couple of holes in it. The Goodacre has like a limit of the number of holes that can be in your kale for these types of markets, but often the shelf life actually needs to be longer. And so your produce quality has to be just as good, if not better, to be able to hold up. So these are all kind of some of the different market channels that currently exist for farmers everywhere and in Minnesota. So let's if you are thinking about wholesale, and if you're not, that's okay. Um, this stuff should still apply. But if you're thinking specifically about considering a wholesale market, there are some considerations that are a little bit different than for fresh market. So generally, you want something that's easy to grow, low labor, and high value. Um, in general, the profit margins are tighter. You're not going to make as much money per item in wholesale. And so your labor becomes really, really important. And unlike the farmer's market or a CSA, where like it's going to take you forever to harvest those green beans, but your customers expect them. And so you're going to grow them. That doesn't make as much sense in a wholesale context. If those green beans take you forever to pick, it's probably not going to be worth it for you. And so, those are kind of like the really simple general considerations. But we also want to start to consider things like, can other people grow these crops more efficiently than you? So carrots are a really good example of this. I think carrots come to mind for a lot of people when they think about wholesale because they're harvested in the fall. They are storage crops. I put this video in here from Minneapolis Public Schools Farm to School program. They did a feature on Open Hands Farm, which is a really awesome farm in Northfield that supplies a lot of the carrots for Minneapolis Public Schools. If you want to watch it on YouTube, it's a fun little video, but it kind of shows you all of the infrastructure that this farm has invested in to grow carrots at scale. And when you see that they have, multiple tractors, they have really specialized harvest equipment, really specialized washing equipment, specialized cooling equipment, it's a really good demonstration of why it's going to be hard for someone who is maybe growing at a much smaller scale and digging their carrots by hand to keep up with a farm like this, with this type of crop. But there are plenty of other crops that, regardless of scale, are not very mechanized. Things like kale, cherry tomatoes, like these are crops that are usually harvested by hand, no matter the scale. And so even if you don't have really specialized infrastructure, you can still sort of keep up from a price perspective with a larger, more specialized farm. We also, of course, want to think about how long it will take for a crop to become profitable. Apples are a great example. There's a lot of room in the market for people to be growing apples. There are a lot of schools who would love to buy apples from farmers, but it's a big investment. It takes many years for an apple tree to grow. Um, and a lot of folks who grow vegetables are not really in a place where they have the land security, the finances to be able to wait that long to start making money. And so those are all really important questions to think about when you're kind of figuring out which market might be right for you and then which crops might be right for that market. One other consideration, especially as growers are kind of looking at schools as markets, is that it can be really challenging when the growing season doesn't overlap with the season when the buyer wants that. So schools are a good example where most schools start in September, and often they want the fun stuff from farms. They want things like cherry tomatoes and melons. But we don't have a lot of time in September to grow those crops. And so I like to encourage people to kind of think about kind of a trade of like, hey, we've got like 2 weeks where we can sell you some melons and some tomatoes. And if we do that, would you be willing to also buy squash or carrots or kale or things that we can continue to grow into the fall to make that relationship work really well for both of us? And then we also really want to be thinking about the post-harvest infrastructure. And as this webinar series goes on, Annalise is going to be talking a lot about post-harvest infrastructure. But one resource is we have this post-harvest handling of fruit and vegetable crops in Minnesota webpage, where you can look at a table of a bunch of different fruit and vegetables, and then the storage conditions they need. And so there are certain things like winter squash that are pretty easy if you don't have a lot of infrastructure. They need to be stored at 50 degrees or so with 50% relative humidity. For most of us, that's like a basement. It's a lot easier than a crop like spinach that needs to be stored at 32 degrees with 95% humidity. And a lot of farms will kind of specialize because there are like three different groups. There are the things like the squashes that are pretty easy, um, don't require a lot of cooling, low humidity. There are things that need to be cold and humid, like um, like the spinach, for example. There are things that need to be cold and drier. And then there are things that can be warmer and humid. And so a lot of farmers will kind of choose their crop groups based on that post-harvest handling. So that if you only have one cooler, that cooler will at least be right for all of the crops that you're growing. So before we move on and go into planning, I just wanted to share a couple of examples of different crops and why they might be right for certain markets, but not others. So carrots are really labor intensive. They require a ton of weeding and then pretty specialized harvest, washing, storage equipment. We have some numbers that we've run. These are like pretty loose. We have found my colleague Ryan Pesh did a farm to school market report where he looked at the amount of money that schools were paying for different crops. And it was like really, really variable. But when we looked at the averages of those, we saw you could, on average, harvest maybe 345 pounds of carrots from a single bed, which could provide a revenue of, depending on how much your customer is willing to pay, $550 to $900 for a bed of carrots. So potentially like really profitable, and they only take up half the season. And so you could still plant another crop um, for the second half of the year. So relatively profitable crop, but really high labor with really specific um, kind of harvest needs. Squash is a really good example of a pretty low labor crop that has a long storage life, doesn't need really specialized conditions. It's a really great comparison to carrots. Um, the the revenue is a lot lower than carrots, and that's for like a full season. And so the revenue is significantly lower, but the labor is also significantly lower, um, which for a lot of growers might end up actually being more profitable once you start to consider your labor. Kale is this great example of a really profitable crop that does not require a ton of labor, or it requires some post-harvest handling. So you do have to harvest regularly. There's moderate risk of insect damage. We have flea beetles in Minnesota that love kale. It's generally harvested by hand. So again, you're not competing with really mechanized production. And there's potentially like a really high revenue per bed. Um, there may not be as much of a market. People might not be willing to buy as much kale. But that's an example I love to share of a crop that could be a really good fit for a very small, low, like mechanization or infrastructure farmer, um, depending on whether you can find a market for it. And just to kind of like hone in on that idea of the sticker price is not always necessarily the best indicator of profitability. I was part of a team a couple of years ago with Dr. Cheng Yan Yu, her students, Manlin and Uma, and then Ryan Pesh, who did crop enterprise budgets, specifically when there was like a big influx of interest in farm to school in Minnesota. And we really wanted to say, like, let's take a few steps back and see whether farm to school is actually profitable for growers and whether we should be encouraging people to do it. And we did these really detailed enterprise budgets where Madeline and Uma like called the farmers every week to ask them about their labor. So we were able to get a really good snapshot of how much effort people were putting into growing these things, their input costs, their yields, the prices that they were charging. And when we looked at profit per 1,000 square feet, um, it was kind of what you would expect. So things like cherry tomatoes had a much higher sticker price, much higher potential profit. Things like squash were way at the bottom. But then when we divided that by people's labor and the number of hours they spent growing that crop, the numbers were really different. So cherry tomatoes, especially outside, had been at the top and they sank to the bottom as like the least profitable crops when we calculated labor. Things like squash and melons, which were low in terms of profit, suddenly became like a much better deal for people. Um, Kale came to the top. So this is just to say that your labor really, really matters when you're thinking about farm profitability and which crops are the right fit for you. And that, of course, also it's more than profitability. It depends on like, do you live at your farm? Can you be there every day? Can you be harvesting cherry tomatoes every single day and pruning and trellising them? Or do you need a more hands-off crop like squash, where you could feasibly like go visit your plots twice a week, once a week even, and still be okay? So, I have been working with a team of folks, with Ariel, who you met last week if you were here. And then we've been running this by a bunch of farmers, hiring farmers to review these. We have been working on a series of resources, to kind of help folks make choices about which crops to grow and then how much to grow, when to plant, things like that. So the first resource, basically we have a web page and the extension website does not allow us to be very creative. It is a lot of text. It doesn't allow us to have a lot of visuals on it. So we have all of the information in this web page, but then we also have some much like nicer visual guides as well that you are all going to get emailed to you. And Lauren put the links in the chat as well. So we have these kind of decision guides that show a bunch of different crops, how much labor they are, the value of that crop, and the risk of that crop. Kind of getting to those same questions again of like, might this be a good crop for your situation and for your market? And then we also have developed some tools, to kind of help you figure out what you can expect in terms of yields, how much space to dedicate to things, how much time. And so that's what we're going to shift into, is really doing that planning process to meet your production goals. So we are really like planning backwards. We are setting our goals at the beginning. So the example that I'm going to work with here today is that a local restaurant in your community wants to buy 100 bunches of radishes from you, every week from June 1st to August 1st. How are we actually going to make that happen? So we're going to shift into like the various questions that go into that, to be able to get us to this point where we can deliver 100 bunches of beautiful radishes to our local restaurant every week. So once we've chosen, and hopefully, like if we go back and we look at those crop planning tools, hopefully these can be useful to you as you're deciding, like, okay, this local restaurant wants to buy 100 bunches of radishes from me every week. Is that going to be a good choice for my operation? Thinking about how much labor is involved, thinking about the risk of something going wrong. Frequently, I need to be harvesting. So once we decide, like, yes, this seems like a good fit for me, I'm going to try to grow 100 bunches of radishes every week for my local restaurant. How do we actually get there? So the question that I like to start with is choosing a variety that is going to work well. And the first super important question is to talk to your customer about what they want. So a radish means a lot of different things, right? If my customer is expecting these cute little pink round cherry radishes every week, and I show up with some daikon radishes, that's not going to go well. That seems really obvious, but it's worth having that conversation. And having a conversation about whether they're open to different things. Like in the fall, our storage radishes, like the second picture, the watermelon radishes tend to do really well. Do they want to try some of those, or are they really set on cherry radishes for the season? Is there a specific color? This is actually really important in farm to school programs. They have to follow USDA color guidelines. And so if they have like an orange item on their menu and you show up with a purple carrot instead of a yellow carrot, that is actually a problem. And so color matters, size really matters. That could be because they have really specialized like chopping equipment, and that equipment can't handle a radish that's bigger than an inch, let's just say, as an example. Or they need their zucchinis to be perfectly straight and a certain length to like either match whatever they're going to do with it or to match their equipment. So those are all really important questions to ask. Asking how long they're going to be stored. Different varieties have really different shelf lives. And so you need to know not just from the time you harvest it to the time it gets to them, but how long is it going to take between them receiving that vegetable and them actually serving that vegetable. Because if it looks beautiful when you deliver it, but it doesn't make it to their customers' tables, they're not going to keep buying from you. And sometimes it's easier to just ask, like, how are you going to use this? And that might influence some of the questions that you're asking. In general, there are some differences, whether you're growing something for wholesale or for fresh market, that you're going to hopefully look for when you're making your variety decisions. So for wholesale, generally, it's better if things are efficient to harvest. Um, they can store well, and they're like really just reliable varieties. They don't have to be the prettiest. They don't always even have to be the best tasting. They just have to be really reliable. Um, Couple examples here, like I have kale on the screen. There are some kales that are grown. They have a growth habit where you can easily just chop at the base and bunch them, and it's super fast, super efficient. And then it's like a single harvest, and you would replant that bed. That might make a lot of sense if you're doing a wholesale account and you're trying to minimize your labor. Whereas the picture of kale on the right, that's one where you would go through and harvest individual leaves and bunch them. That plant is going to continue to produce leaves throughout the season. That could be really nice for a farmer's market or a CSA where you want to have consistent kale every week. It's pretty, it's kind of a fun color. So those are two really different kales that I might grow for really different purposes. So again, that flavor, color, attractiveness really matter when you're selling directly to the customer because you have to stand out maybe more than the next person at the farmer's market, or at least more than your customer going to the supermarket. And that harvest over a longer period of time might make a lot of sense for that type of system. Sometimes when you read descriptions, it's not always super obvious. So I have just a couple examples. So here are some beets. On the left, we have Merlin. They're smooth, they're uniform, they're round. They have a high sugar content. That is like a sign to me that they maybe taste really good. They're good for bunching, the best tasting beet. So that might be a perfect beet for your farmer's market stand or for your CSA. Whereas Boro is described as widely adapted, reliable, still has good flavor. It stores well through the winter. Those are some things that stand out to me as being like good properties for a wholesale beet. Something I like at Johnny's, and I'm not saying that you should only buy seed from Johnny's, but they have some really nice filters to help you choose. And they specifically have a feature called Easy Choice. And those are the varieties that are just like consistently easy to grow, good performers. That I think is useful if you're growing something for the first time. We also want to think about spring versus fall. So if you are growing radishes every week for your local restaurant, the varieties you're planting in the spring should not be the same varieties you're planting in the summer. Those radishes have to go through really different conditions. So in the spring, you're going from really cold and wet conditions generally to hot and dry. And so they have to be able to handle that shift. In the fall, you're doing the opposite. You're going from generally hot and dry conditions to cold conditions. And it seems like fall is either pretty wet or pretty dry. So those are just like really different shifts that the plants have to go through. And some are much better suited to one versus the other. Some things to look for. Sometimes it's really obvious. Sometimes, like on the bottom here, it'll just say for spring planting or for fall planting. that makes it really easy. Some other things to look for when crops go from cold to warm, we are looking for bolting resistance. So cool season crops like spinach, um, brassicas will flower when they go from cold to hot, and that's generally not something we want to happen. Bolting is like when they flower too early and it impacts like the actual crop that we're trying to harvest. So bolting resistance, less bitterness. Crops tend to get bitter when they go from cold to hot, and so bitterness is a trait to look for. Heat resistance, stress tolerance, those are all really important characteristics when you're choosing varieties for spring. When you're looking at fall crops, we're more looking at storage life, cold tolerance, and disease resistance. Generally, these last few springs have been really, really wet in Minnesota, but generally we see more disease pressure in the fall because as temperatures drop at night, we get all that dew in the morning. And that is just like perfect conditions for diseases to spread. And so disease resistance becomes increasingly important. Andrew is asking about specific seed catalogs for commercial growers. I would say in general, the growers that I work with tend to look at Johnny's, High Mowing, Fedco. Um, there are some more local seed companies as well who are trying to breed for Minnesota conditions, so like North Circle Seeds, Driftless Organics. Um, there are more. I think those tend to be the companies that are a little bit more focused on commercial growers um, versus gardeners. But again, I cannot endorse anyone specific. Those are just kind of the ones that commercial growers tend to use more of. So if we were trying to fulfill this order of 100 bunches of radishes every week, I might look for my early spring planting, something that's early, quick. It does well under heat stress. This summer planting, here's a variety that like it seems pretty fluid, flexible. It can handle spring, summer, or fall. It can handle warm weather. Um, and then in the fall, we, I think something that in the one dynamic in the fall is like depending on rainfall, it can be hard to harvest on time. And so something that has kind of an extended, not just shelf life, but period of ripening. Radishes can be so particular. If you don't harvest them at the right moment, they split, they get bitter. So something that has an extended ripening period might be a nice fit for fall. But generally, with every crop that you're growing, it's a good idea to go through, unless it's tomatoes, right? Your tomato is going to be in the field for the whole season. But anything that's a quick crop, like lettuce, radishes, beets, those medium crops like broccoli, where you're planting multiple times a year, you really want to have different spring varieties and different fall varieties to match those conditions.
Natalie, there's a question in the chat. Are there specific seed catalogs for commercial growers?
Yep, I just answered that one.
Oh, sorry, I missed it.
So yeah, Johnny's, High Mowing, Fedco tend to be some of the really popular ones. And then actually Jordan, I didn't say Jordan Seeds, but they're a local company too that a lot of farmers use. Um, yeah, one other nice thing with Johnny's is they have these kind of calendars that will list like the part of the year that that specific variety is well suited for. So that's a nice resource as well. So once we've chosen our varieties, we need to figure out how much seed to get and how much space to dedicate if we want to be getting 100 bunches of radishes every week. And so I have found that this is a really hard question to answer. Um, there are some hints out there. So Johnny's does have charts for transplanted vegetables and direct seeded vegetables that will give an estimated yield per row. We have found that these numbers are not great for Minnesota, at least. And it's not in a specific direction. It's not like, oh, they're like 50% higher than they should be. Sometimes they're really high, sometimes they're really low. It's something to look at, but I honestly don't recommend this as a good benchmark for Minnesota farms. Um, Another resource is the Dane County Extension. So that's around Madison, Wisconsin. They have an amazing conference every year. It's coming up. I encourage you to check it out. It's an organic vegetable conference. And it's like the most kind of in-depth technical conference in our region for vegetable farmers, but it's still like really fun and accessible. They basically every year they profile a few different crops and they have a few farmers who are really good at growing those crops come and just walk through like all of the logistics of how they grow that crop. And that's a place where you can see some yield estimates too. Our nutrient management guide for commercial fruit and vegetable crops has some kind of yield targets. But what we have done is try to like synthesize all this information and come up with more accurate estimates that we've had a bunch of farmers review. And so we have come up with our own estimates. And of course, this is not perfect. Every farm is going to be different. But we've come up with guidelines for like per plant yield and then 100-foot. I've actually changed this to rows. This is an old screenshot. 100-foot row estimates as well of what you might expect the yield to be. So again, Lauren put the link to the web page in the chat, as well as the resource page for this whole webinar series. You're going to find those there. It's also getting emailed to you, so don't feel like you need to go look at it right now. It'll be in your email. But hopefully you can use these to kind of estimate your yield per row, so you can figure out how many rows to dedicate to each of your crops. And then we also have a bunch of information about recommended spacing, the harvest window, when to plant. So here's our radish example. Basically, we estimate that you could get 35 to 50 bunches of cherry radishes per row. And if you're growing in a bed system, so like a 3-foot bed with 2-foot or 3-foot walkways in between, we would recommend 3 rows per bed. You would seed pretty closely and then thin to 1 radish per inch. And so per row, we estimate that you're going to need about 1,500 seeds. That's about 4,500 seeds per bed. And so if our customer wants 100 bunches of radishes every week, we're estimating like 35 to 50 bunches per row and 3 rows per bed. So essentially we would be planting like 1 bed of radishes every week for that customer, 100-foot bed with 3 rows. If you have never grown a crop before, I really estimate on the low end in terms of yields. So it says 35 to 50. If this is your first time growing radishes, at least for a wholesale account, I would assume you're going to be towards the lower end of that range. Hopefully you prove yourself wrong and you can grow more. But that is, that's kind of the assumption. So I would essentially dedicate 1 bed per week to this grower. A few notes about that. These yield estimates are not perfect. They're super variable. And the best yield estimates are actually your own records. So hopefully you are keeping good records on your farm of how many bunches you're getting per row or per bed so that you can kind of tweak that to match your own farm and your own conditions. And that's going to be a better estimate for you than for next year. And then like don't assume, especially if you're transplanting, don't assume that every single transplant is going to be healthy and good to plant. It's better to plant extra. And even experienced farmers will plant like 10 to 15% extra beyond their own yield estimates, just kind of assuming that things go wrong and every year is variable. It's better to plant more. And then, I mean, you don't want to plant so much more that you're wasting a lot of food, but to plant a little bit extra. And then if you have extra, you can call the restaurant and say, hey, I have extra this week. Do you have capacity to take more? Sometimes they might. If not, you could try one of your different customers. And then also, like, if you don't have irrigation, your numbers are going to be lower than this. If you're not doing some basic like soil fertility planning, your numbers are going to be lower than this. These estimates kind of rely on the idea that you are managing these crops pretty well. You will notice when you look at these spreadsheets that some of these things have a range. So the radishes, not so much, but broccoli, for example, is listed as 12 to 18 inches. And there's actually a star on there that says in fields that have a lot of disease history, people will go up to 24 inches even. So there is a range and some considerations when you're making that choice. Um, Generally, if you go tighter spacing, weed control is going to be easier because the plants form a canopy more quickly. Um, your plants tend to be smaller when you plant them closer together versus when you plant them further apart. They tend to grow a little bit larger. That's why the yield sometimes doesn't change a ton. Like you may have fewer broccoli heads at tighter spacing, but they're smaller versus larger broccoli heads. So fewer total, but larger heads at wider spacing. The benefits to wider spacing are disease management. So it's harder for pathogens to jump from plant to plant. But for a lot of people, it's just what works well with your equipment. Um, you might have transplanting equipment that's just set to 14 inches. And so you do everything at 14 inches because the time and effort it takes to adjust that equipment isn't worth it. Or here's an example of a farmer who has pretty wide walkways between her beds because that is what her tractor allows. And so it's just what makes sense to her farm. And so we give those ranges knowing that there's going to be variation just based on the equipment you have, based on your approach to farming, um, and some of those trade-offs. All right, so the final question, when do I plant it? So we need to be planting for weekly harvest, which means we need to be basically planting every week. And really, you're going to look at the specific days to maturity in the seed catalog. So there are, this is beets. I know it's not radishes, but there are going to be beets that take 50 days. There are going to be beets that take 60 days. So make sure you look at the specific days to maturity of that variety. And then you can kind of count backwards. So in theory, you want to harvest, let's say September 1st, count back 50 days. That's July 13th. I put an asterisk there because days to maturity are not perfect. They're not always made for Minnesota in general. It's a good practice to give yourself an entire extra week to 10 days to allow for germination. And you also want to know, does the seed company consider that to be a direct seeded crop or a transplanted crop? If in their minds it's transplanted crop, the days to maturity is from transplant to harvest. If in their mind it's a direct seeded crop, it's from seeding to harvest. But we transplant a lot of crops in Minnesota that are not considered transplanted crops. Kale is a great example. I would never direct seed kale in Minnesota because we have too many flea beetles. But seed catalogs often consider it a direct seeded crop. So that's kind of good to know as you're figuring out days to maturity. And you can always call the seed representative from the seed company you're buying from and ask. If you have regular harvest, so this is a little bit more complicated than just like I'm going to grow beets for September 1st, you're trying to harvest every week. Basically, you just have to do that process every week. So if this is a 21-day radish and you want to harvest June 1st, count back 21 days, especially in the spring when it's cold, give a little bit of extra time. Seeds germinate much more slowly in cold soils. And with something like this, I might just like plant an extra bed like much earlier to kind of try to even it out and get to the right date. The other thing is take frost dates seriously. I know that seems obvious, but every spring I see farmers have major losses due to frost. And so as you're doing that process of saying, okay, I want to harvest on June 1st, I need to plant 21 days, actually maybe more like 30 days because it's cold. And I do that. Can I plant my radishes on May 1st? Radishes, absolutely. But something like basil, absolutely not. And so that's one of the things in that guide too, is like the first date where it's really safe to plant outside. And we have been quite conservative in that estimate. There are people who plant earlier. But if you're just like doing this for the first time, I would go with that more conservative estimate because we see so many cases of really, really cold damaged plants. So that's that last column you see here on the screen is first outdoor planting date. So in summary, um, know your markets before you're planting. It's not fun for anyone to get stuck in a situation where you've put so much labor into growing something and you don't have a place to sell it. Um, Conversely, once you have a market, if you have a buyer, you want to make sure that you're delivering so that they'll continue to buy from you in the future. So know what your customers want, when they want it, how much of it they want, and then plan backwards if possible to be able to do that. And then choose crops that like fit your lifestyle, that fit your farm size, they fit your equipment and infrastructure, and really consider your labor as valuable as you're making those decisions. Um, and hopefully that is a helpful place to start. I am available um, like anytime if you want to reach out and you have questions as you're doing your crop planning for the year. So I'm going to just throw up the schedule again. These are the upcoming webinars, and we've got some time to do questions. So Sue is asking, why would the high tunnel and field planting of strawberries be the same date of May 15th? Um, that's a great question. It kind of depends on your high tunnel. There are people who have heated high tunnels, but I have seen plenty of cases where um, like crops that are not cold tolerant can get really cold in a high tunnel, even early in the season. So they do a good job of bringing the temperature up, but if there is a hard freeze, they do not always prevent that hard freeze from happening in the tunnel. The other thing we see in a tunnel is like it's really worth it to grow those kind of short, cold loving crops in the shoulder seasons. Um, so like absolutely we should be using that time and that space to grow things like spinach and lettuce and even beets and carrots. But the more cold tolerant plants like cucumbers, tomatoes, strawberries, we don't see that much benefit to planting them early. Like they really, there's so much growth that happens in May and June where they will overtake their outdoor counterparts. Um, but planting super early when the soil is still kind of cold doesn't like give us actually that much benefit. So again, those are like fairly conservative recommendations. There probably are people that plant earlier in a high tunnel, um, but we don't necessarily recommend it. And we see this with tomatoes all the time. It's like mid-May and people are like, it's a high tunnel, it should be fine. And they lose their whole tomato crop. So it's in my mind, it's just not really worth it. The benefit you're getting is not always worth the risk. I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Any other questions? You can feel free to put them in the chat or you can turn on your camera, unmute yourself.
I have a quick question. It's not directly related to seeds, but it's related to planting techniques for directly seeding crops in Minnesota. I notice a lot of larger operations, like mid-size and up, they have like some type of weed guard fabric they put down over their row beds, and they're directly seeding into that. How do they do that and not wreck the weed management product they're using on those rows when they're directly seeding and using that for weed management?
So I would say most people are not direct seeding into like a plastic mulch, for example. They're either transplanting into it, in which case you have basically like little spikes that usually are on your transplanter, and they'll like make the divot to transplant into as you go. There are a couple that are more like hand tool sized. Um, The exception might be like you could be using landscape fabric and like bringing basically like bringing it part way up the bed and leaving like a small space where you could plant kind of like a row of something in between that. But for the most part, people are not direct seeding in beds that have row cover or landscape fabric. Maybe the exception could be larger seeded things like pumpkins, where like you maybe already have your holes punched, and then you are like using a like a like a potato seeder. A lot of people use to plant pumpkin seeds into that. But yeah, not like really small direct seeded crops. If there is something I'm not thinking of, feel free to share.
Natalie, this is Don Smith. I have a question for you. I've seen seedlings being planted that are on a paper, how should I say, paper support, and they just go right down the row.
Hmm.
How well do those work?
They're great. It depends on your soil a little bit. So paper pot transplanters um, are, I love them. Not everybody loves them, but I think most people who use them do. They're originally from Japan, and now there are a couple companies that make them actually. So the paper pot, like original paper pot company, Johnny's has a paper pot system, Neversink has a paper pot system. And the upfront infrastructure for it is kind of expensive. I mean, not compared to a lot of things, but compared to
Yeah.
doing it by hand. But the labor savings, I think, really pay off. And most farms who do it, like, just commit to that as their planting system. And so they are paper chains that you kind of spread out into essentially like it looks a lot like just a seeding tray. And you can get them in different sizes that match like a 72 cell tray, 128 cell tray, for example. And then it's a little transplanter that kind of pulls that paper chain apart and plants into the soil. And it makes things like beets, which like you wouldn't really transplant. Some people do, but
Yeah.
you might not usually transplant them. It actually makes it feasible to transplant. So it's especially a good system if you're doing quick successions, like you're really focused on greens where you're constantly planting. Yeah, I think it's a great system. If you have really heavy clay soil, it's challenging. But if you have pretty good like organic matter, some sand in your soil, it can be a really good fit.
For like a 30-foot row, does it make sense to use those at all or not?
Yeah, can.
You would just use a deep hole and then just line them up and then just cover it up with a hole again. Correct?
You don't even have to. So if you have the whole system, the
Yeah.
paper pot transplanter does it for you. So you're just dragging it along and it kind of digs a furrow, drops the strip of paper chains in, and then covers them up at the end. And often someone will have, like, you'll have someone follow you, or you would go back in and just do some, just like you would when you're transplanting, like a little bit of damage control. Just make sure everything's tucked in nicely. But for the most part, you just drag it through.
Do you need the machine or can you use it without the machine?
I think for the labor savings to make sense, you really need the whole system. It's like
Okay.
really designed to be used as a system.
Yeah, but it's possible if I have a garden that I have a 30-foot row that I could still put it in using that.
That's a good question. I don't know how easy it is to like physically pull the chains apart without the transplanter.
Okay.
Any other, here, maybe I'll just share a photo of that so people know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, because
Sharing my like Google image search here. So this is not super
like
fancy.
Johnny's seeds and so forth. I've seen them, and they really look, how should I say, slick.
Yep, they're really nice. So you stick your tray on there and it kind of like pulls it apart and plants the row.
Yeah.
It's quick. Yep. People who have that system really like it. And I would say it's a good system if you're at the like 1 to 3 acre scale. After that, you kind of size out of it because it's really like a human powered system.
Yeah.
And yeah, people do onions with it. Any other questions? All right. Well, I can hang out for a couple minutes if anyone wants to stick around. Lauren is going to email out that resource guide, and it's a running guide, so you'll see all the resources from last week in addition to this week, and we'll keep adding to that every week as we go. So the like digitally accessible version is on the web page, but the version that's nicer to like print out and look at will be in that resource guide. So thanks, everybody. We will see you next week for a discussion about adding fruit to your farm. So Madeline Wimmer will be leading next week's discussion.
Thanks, Natalie.
Okay.
Thanks
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
coming,
Thank
Bridget.
you.
All right, I think we can end it.
Sounds
Lauren.
good. Yep. Bye-bye.